January 1692, Massachusetts Bay Colony, Salem Village. 9-year-old Elizabeth Parris, daughter of Reverend Samuel Parris, fell mysteriously ill. Her 11-year-old cousin Abigail, who also lives in the Parris household, began exhibiting the same symptoms. They were having these weird fits, something you'd see in a modern-day exorcism movie. Violent contortions, screaming episodes, freezing in strange positions, and claiming to feel prickling and pinching. Before they fell ill, Betty and Abigail would regularly hang out in the kitchen with Tituba, the Parris family slave from Barbados. Tituba told them stories and was experimenting with simple divination techniques like the Venus glass, activities that Puritans back in that era would call borderline witchcraft. February 1692. After a full month of fasting and prayer, Betty and Abigail's condition did not change, so the girls were examined by the trusted local physician William Griggs, who pronounced their alarming behavior to be caused by bewitchment. For weeks, Betty and Abigail kept quiet and didn't want to identify who bewitched them, likely due to genuine confusion. But the adults were applying a crazy amount of pressure because they could not have witchcraft going on in their Puritan community. In late February, the girls cracked after having to hear "Who bewitched you?" Name them every time they went to market or to church. So they finally gave them names as following: Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne. However, before they cracked, Parris family neighbor Mary Sibley proposed a home remedy. So, Tituba mixed the afflicted girl's urine with rye meal and baked it with hearth ashes and fed it to the dog. The belief was based on the assumption that the witch would feel pain when the dog ate the cake, revealing their identity. Ironic part is, Reverend Parris discovered what they were doing and he was pissed. He condemned them from the pulpit, calling it going to the devil for help against the devil. Their neighbor Mary Sibley had to make a public confession before the congregation for even suggesting it, and this was a turning point. This confirmed to the village that supernatural evil was festering among them. That same day, 2 more girls fell ill. 12-year-old Ann Putnam Jr., daughter of one of the village's most influential families, and 17-year-old Elizabeth Hubbard, who lived with the trusted local physician Dr. Griggs, the one who initially diagnosed Elizabeth and Abigail with bewitchment. That was the start of this hellfire. So let me give you a rundown. Sarah Good, pipe-smoking beggar who bounced from house to house with her kids, begging, and when turned down, she'd mutter profanities under her breath. She was pregnant, desperate, and poor. Ironically, though, she had a husband. Sarah Osborne, old lady that was bedridden and didn't attend church in over a year, which is a serious offense in Puritan society. She also married her Irish indentured servant. And Tituba, indigenous black slave from Barbados. She was Reverend Samuel Parris's property. Her exotic background and knowledge of Caribbean spiritual practices made her a natural suspect in Puritan eyes. So these women were shoo-ins to be witches. Tituba being an exotic slave, Sarah Good a homeless beggar, and Sarah Osborne married to an indentured servant and never seen in church. March 1692. The trial took place in the Salem Village Meeting House led by magistrates John Hawthorne and John Corwin. John Hawthorne was an aggressive asshole who presumed guilt from jump, and John Corwin was a bit more balanced. The place was packed. It was damn near as much a theater as it was a legal proceeding. Sarah Good denied it all. She claimed to be muttering psalms under her breath when leaving people's houses, even though she could not recite any psalm verses in court. Her husband called her a witch, but only because he really didn't like her. Sarah Osborne maintained innocence because she was so ill she couldn't even stand up. So how could she be a witch? Weirdest thing though is Tituba confessed to being a witch. She had an absurd story about a tall man from Boston coming at her with a book demanding that she signs. She described seeing Sarah Good and Osborne's names in there too. She talked about red cats flying on poles, devilish creatures, yellow birds, all types of absurd shit. I don't understand why she did that, because it's like you're already a slave. Now you're gonna be charcoal. Maybe it was a last-ditch effort, thinking that these tyrannical cultists foaming at the mouth for blood would spare her. Also, get this. Abigail and Elizabeth's dramatic asses were shrieking and convulsing while Tituba gave her testimony. The three women were sent to Boston jail, and surprise, surprise, Elizabeth and Abigail showed groundbreaking improvement. Unfortunately, the three women going to jail did not stop the accusations. While the other girls returned to their normal selves, Ann Putnam not only continued to struggle, her symptoms actually got worse. And this is not good because her mom and dad, Ann Putnam Sr. and Thomas, were deeply involved in village politics and land disputes. So they used Ann to target the family's enemies. Ann's first accusation was Martha Corey, a respectable church-going woman known for her strong faith. Ann says she saw her ghost, and when Martha got word of it, she dismissed it and said the witch trials were a waste of time and just pure foolishness, which was a bad move because people were already on edge. And now you're basically saying they're idiots. So a quote-unquote delegation visited her, and of course she kept that same energy. Y'all are dumbasses. Did you expect me to meet you at the door with a witch broom? Martha runs off at the mouth and says that if Ann had visions, she'd know what I'm wearing right now. And of course, somebody from the delegation tipped Ann off, and Ann said exactly what she was wearing, so Martha looked even more guilty. One of the first major accusations was Elizabeth Proctor, wife of tavern keeper John Proctor, who was a successful farmer with a shit ton of property. Second major accusation was Rebecca Nurse, a 71-year-old faithful member of the church for decades, beloved by the community, a woman that's damn near everybody's grandma. Rebecca Nurse's husband was a successful farmer and their land bordered the Putnams' land, so there was a long history of land dispute and political rivalry. So it only made sense for them to be next. And guess what this power-hungry bitch Ann Putnam Sr. did? Having her daughter was not enough. She said that she had been bewitched as well. And given the amount of power she already had, it caused the other adults to come forward with their tales of bewitchment. Because if Ann Sr. could be bewitched, surely a lower peasant could have the same fate. Now let's get back to Martha Corey. She was arrested, and when she faced her day of judgment, she met it with sarcasm because she believed the accusations were absurd. The judge interpreted her demeanor as stubborn and prideful, even though Ann Jr. mimicked her every movement in court, which would aggravate anyone and would be contempt of court present day. That did not matter. They sent her up creek. As for Rebecca Nurse, it was pretty painful to watch. She was an old lady that was strong in her faith, and she denied the accusations fervently. During her examination, the bewitched performed their looniest dramatic displays yet. Rebecca was trembling with fear and confusion. Her arrest divided the community because nobody believed that she was a witch, but the judges made their decision. To Salem jail she goes. April 1692. Now let's talk about Elizabeth Proctor and her successful husband John Proctor, tavern owner and landowner, one of the Putnams' longtime rivals. John Proctor was known to be blunt, and zero changed about that. He called all of the afflicted girls liars and suggested a good ass whooping might fix them. Classic belts to ass. He felt it was foolishness because his servant Mary Warren tried the act and was quickly called out, and she miraculously recovered with swiftness. When his wife's day in court came, he held on to his sentiments about how it was all exaggerations. The court immediately turned on him and arrested him on the spot. And this scared a lot of people because now there's proof that you cannot publicly doubt the trials without becoming their target. This cascaded into a series of multiple arrests and examinations, and not just in Salem village, but from other villages miles away. It's fair to say that the small ember turned into a forest fire. The witch hunt was metastasizing. Old property disputes, family rivalries, and personal grudges from across the region were being settled through witchcraft accusations. The afflicted girls were being brought to other towns to identify witches there, like supernatural consultants. May 1692. Let me be clear, ministers weren't even immune to these accusations. Reverend George Bureau, former minister in Salem village for 3 years, a decade prior, was summoned to face witchcraft charges because evidently him leaving Salem village left a bad taste in many people's mouth. Keep in mind too, this is Puritan society, so a minister being accused of partaking in witchcraft is huge. This is paranoia reaching its peak. He was picked up all the way from his home in Maine, over 100 miles away. And for what? He owed them money and abandoned their village in time of need. By this time, the witch trials have been going on for a solid 5 months, and Sarah Osborne ends up passing away in prison in Boston. Unfortunately, she didn't even get to see trial. She was already elderly and bedridden, so the harsh prison conditions didn't help her situation. She was the first death. Remember, everyone accused would not die on the gallows. Some would die waiting in dungeons in chains. These deaths are usually overlooked in the final count, but they were just as much executions as hangings. The process itself was lethal. Late May 1692, a high-ranking New England Puritan clergyman returned from England after negotiating a new charter, and he came back with a new governor, Sir William Phips. The charter is basically rights to independence and self-governance outside of the British Crown. Massachusetts Bay Colony's charter had been revoked in 1684, and until the new charter was issued, the colony had been operating in a kind of legal limbo. The instability created anxiety and disorder, fertile grounds for witch hunts. Until this point, there had only been pre-trial examinations to determine if those accused of witchcraft had enough evidence against them to warrant a trial. With the arrival of the new charter, courts could now be formed to oversee the growing witchcraft cases. Sir William Phips was a rough, self-made man, a ship's carpenter who became a sea captain, found a Spanish treasure ship, was knighted, and became governor. He had no legal training and limited education. He arrived to find the jails overflowing with accused witches and an expectant population demanding justice. Within days, he would make decisions that killed innocent people. Governor Phips approved the creation of a special court, the Court of Oyer and Terminer, to try witchcraft cases, meaning to hear and determine. The court's existence pretty much means that those accused are presumed guilty and had to prove innocence. And this late in the game is pretty much an uphill battle. The court would operate without proper oversight and without normal legal protections that the English common law guaranteed. It was pretty much the perfect storm for witch hunts. June 1692. Citizen Bridget Bishop was tried and condemned at the first sitting of court in Salem. Bridget ran a tavern, wore flashy clothes, had been married multiple times, and had been accused of witchcraft years earlier. She was loud, independent, and unapologetic, the perfect first defendant. Bridget was the first person to be executed on Proctor's Ledge at Gallow Hill in Salem. She was hung. Bridget Bishop was transported by cart from Salem jail through town to the execution site. Imagine that journey, the crowd lined in the streets, some jeering, some praying, children gawking. She would have been bound, perhaps already hooded. The cart creaking up the rocky path to Proctor's Ledge, a craggy outcrop on Gallow Hill. This wasn't a formal gallows with a trap door. This was a tree limb or a simple wooden frame. The execution was crude and public. Colonial hangings were not the drop executions that became the standard later. The condemned stood on a cart or ladder, the noose was placed around their neck, and then the support was removed. Death came from slow strangulation, not a broken neck. It could take minutes of choking, kicking, and struggling. Spectators watched it all. This was meant to be a lesson and a deterrent. With Bridget Bishop's death, a line was crossed. The abstract became concrete. A woman was dead by the state's hands for an impossible crime to prove. After hearing about the gruesome death of Bridget Bishop, 12 prominent ministers of the colony advised the courts not to rely entirely on spectral evidence. And without spectral evidence, there was zero evidence of the crimes. The judges understood this, but still continued the executions. July 19th, 1692. Rebecca Nurse, the loving community grandmother, and Sarah Good, and a few others were executed on this day, totaling 5 executions. The jury initially acquitted Rebecca Nurse, and she was found not guilty, but Chief Justice pressured the jury to reconsider, and she was sentenced to hang. Sarah Good, the pipe-smoking beggar who bounced from house to house begging, and when turned down would mutter profanities under her breath, unleashed a fury. A reverend urged her to confess, and she said, "You are a liar. I am no more a witch than you are a wizard, and if you take my life, God will give you blood to drink." Ironically, 25 years later, Reverend Nicholas Noyes died of a hemorrhage, choking on his own blood. People remembered Sarah Good's curse and whispered about it. Whether coincidence or divine justice, her words achieved a kind of immortality. She had the last words after all. John Proctor, husband to Elizabeth Proctor, the man who challenged the trial saying the girls were liars and that the whole thing was ridiculous, and a curse to justice, ended up paying with his life. His outspoken skepticism had marked him for death. His wife Elizabeth was also sentenced to death but received a stay of execution because she was pregnant. She survived. Many more were executed over hearsay and whispers heard through the grapevine. October 1692. With public opinion turning against the trials, Governor Phipps dissolves the Court of Oyer and Terminer, the courts that killed. The Court of Oyer and Terminer existed for exactly 5 months, May 27th to October 29th, 1692. In that short time, it tried dozens of people and sentenced 20 to death. Its dissolution came partly from pressure, partly from Phipps' own fear. His wife had been accused, and accusations were reaching even the highest ranks of society. When the witch hunt threatened the governor's own household, suddenly the trials became questionable. Governor Phipps claimed he had been away on military campaigns and hadn't understood what the court was doing. This was largely a lie. He had been kept informed, but with ministers condemning spectral evidence, with prominent colonists in jail, with his own wife accused, Phipps finally acted. His disillusion of the court was self-preservation as much as justice. The court's dissolution came too late for the 20 dead, for the families destroyed, for the 4-year-old Dorothy Good, who was permanently traumatized, for the dozens still languishing in jail. The court sin was necessary but insufficient. It stopped the killings but did not repair the harm. January 36, 1693. Governor Phipps steps in and issues reprieves for the 8 scheduled executions. Upon paying their jail fees, all of those accused of witchcraft are now officially free to go. Phipps overruled his own Chief Justice and pardoned all 8 condemned prisoners.